And I'm glad you clarified the issue of mandate right there. From this NRA that you released, money laundering threats, you classified this as medium in the country, the money laundering threat. Though vulnerability, you said it's high. Clarify for us that disparity.
One, you must first understand that this was a scientific process. There is input and there is output based on a certain methodology, the way you carry out the normal research. And while you're looking at the vulnerabilities and the overall rating as medium and one is high, vulnerabilities emanate out of a certain context. For example, if institutions don't have good corporate governance structures, vulnerabilities exist, but does not necessarily mean that that offense will be committed. When we are looking at the institutions that we regulate for money laundering and terrorism financing, for that matter, we are looking at institutions where there is responsibility that is bestowed on certain persons within that institution. Where, let's say, for example, internal controls are not prescribed as a policy, then we look at vulnerabilities based on such situations. That whereas you have this particular office that is supposed to carry out a certain function, there aren't any prescribed policies or controls for that matter that are probably board approved to provide for that office to function effectively. So that's how we look at the vulnerability. It exists because you have not put in place certain control measures to deal with the vulnerabilities.
Okay.
But again, by and large, when we looked at all those offenses, there is also quantum in terms of what has been generated by the offenses that we have so far prosecuted. And that's how we came up with the whole rating of a medium in terms of money laundering.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned banks earlier on. You said, they are very central in our financial operability as a country. There are other spaces that we are seeing also being very vulnerable points. There is the issue of real estate, money remittances providers, SACCOs, legal professions, and second-hand car dealers. Maybe starting with this issue of second-hand car dealers, what is the vulnerability? What is the loophole right there that can be taken advantage of?
No, that's one sector that is unregulated, so to speak. When I say unregulated, I'll cite the few other sectors that are regulated. The banks are regulated by Central Bank of Kenya. The insurance sector is regulated by IRA. The security sector is regulated by CMA. The NGO sector is regulated by the NGO Coordination Board. The gaming industry is regulated by the Betting Control and Licensing Board. Who regulates the second-hand motor vehicle dealers? I'll say there's no regulator. It's basically, if you wanted to start one today, a company, you just need to register with the Business Registration Service and you have a certificate of incorporation. Look for an empty yard, look for a lease, you have capital to import cars and you're in business. But if you look at how that sector operates, and I don't want to indict them, this is actually the outcome of the NRA. You can comfortably walk into a yard, and if the dealer accepts you to buy in cash, any car you want, a Probox, for example, 1.8 million, you'll transact. At the end of the day, when the second-hand motor vehicle dealer walks into a bank, he'll just say, I sold a car, KCF 285T. And it's possible because nothing prohibits that dealer from dealing in cash. It's not an offense to deal in cash in this country. Yes, there is a threshold in terms of reporting or rather declaring large cash transactions. It's 10,000. The other day, the president upscaled that to 1.5 million, an equivalent of $15,000. So at the end of the day, if let's say it's below the 1.5 million, that is now more or less what is prescribed, then you can bank that money. the bank can decide to ask or not to ask details of that transaction, because all what they're supposed to do is to report what has been already prescribed in law as a reporting threshold. Get back to the dealer. If that dealer wanted to lend on behalf of anybody, and this is possible, or even someone who's probably obtained illicit proceeds. Let's say, for example, a public servant who gets a commission or a kickback for helping someone get an award of a contract. And he walks into a car dealership and he says, I want to buy this car. And then he changes his mind and tells the guy, by the way, there's $1 million shillings here. You know very well that where I sit, if I deposit this money in the bank account, there are questions that will be asked. Can you just deposit these as sales of your business? Keep 10% of that. How will you know that Saitoti took $1 million shillings to a dealer, and then tomorrow he can buy a car on my behalf? I'll be able to dispose of that car. All what I need to do after I've gotten the car from the dealer is to walk into the bank with a check or even get a transfer. Questions are asked, I sold a car. Can you provide us with any documentation to support that transaction? I have a logbook reading my name, KCF 001T. Fair deal. I've already got the money that I wanted. Put that money into something else. I can buy a plot elsewhere, and I've cleaned that money. And that's basically the process of money laundering. It's as simple as that.
Whoa.
So we are looking at gatekeepers, and that's why we are saying that sector is unregulated. And the gatekeepers are the institutions that are mandated in law, or ought to be mandated in law, to ensure that illicit proceeds don't get an easy way into the economy. The reason why banks ask those questions and want clarifications and want documentation to support transactions is just to ensure that illicit proceeds don't get their way into the economy.
Definitely.
For the second-hand motor vehicle dealers, I mean, we are human beings, and everybody is out to make money.
Yes.
Some are out to make money in a bad way, some are out to make money in the right way. So when we say that sector is vulnerable, it's just because of the fact that there isn't enough measures or protective measures for that matter to ensure that they are not abused for money laundering. We are not necessarily saying that they are being abused for money laundering. We are saying that there are vulnerabilities that exist in that sector that create some threats or vulnerabilities for money laundering to happen.
Definitely.
Yes.
And
for the same again, I think
yes.
which other sector you mentioned?
Actually,
the real estate
professions, actually.
Let me talk about the real estate.
Okay.
The real estate sector has a regulator. But looking at the context in which we can refer that to as a regulator, it's a bit wanting. Because the regulator who's supposed to regulate the real estate sector is the Real Estate Agents Registration Board, which is basically, as per the current mandate in law, it only registers those estate agents or realtors for that matter. We have not really put in place strong measures to ensure that that sector is properly regulated for money laundering and terrorism financing. And that's one recommendation that we've given in the National Risk Assessment, to make sure that that body
yes.
becomes an effective regulator.
Okay, definitely. There is the element of combating corruption, and we've seen efforts from the government, the formation of multi-agency task force by the president on corruption has been very critical in regards to beating corruption. Talk to us the mandate of FRC in that, and so far what's been the outcome as it stands.
The Financial Reporting Center is a member of the multi-agency task force on corruption that was established by His Excellency the President. And the objective of that task force was to bring together all the agencies that have a stake in fighting money laundering and, let's say, corruption, sorry, for that matter. Previously, the efforts was disjointed. But out of the experience we've had trying to work around having a framework that ensures that the agencies work together to effectively combat corruption, the government realized that us not coming together was creating an opportunity for more or less a very, very weak engagement among ourselves in dealing with corruption. We all know that corruption is more prevalent in public procurement. And I say public procurement because government is the biggest spender when it comes to money. And government contracts are largely big procurement processes. Basically at the level of the normal consumables in a government entity to huge projects, roads, construction, etc. We are able to see, or other banks are able to see, because they report to us suspicion, transactions that could be linked to corruption. And when they're filing, the process of filing suspicion with us, there are parameters in which these banks file those reports. We have guidelines on how to identify red flags, and they're able to tell when a transaction has the ingredients of corruption or embezzlement or fraud for that matter. Once they file that, FRC is in a advantage position to inform the other agencies that are responsible for fighting corruption, either DCI or EACC, that we see this person A, who's probably an employee of this institution, receiving certain money from a person who has also received business from this institution. And basically, those are the linkages or the red flags that generate reports for us.
Well, thank you very much, DG Financial Reporting Center, Captain Retired Saitoti Maika, for your input and elaborating, making us understand what exactly is happening in countering, money laundering in the country and terrorism financing. We appreciate your time. All right, so there you have it, the ins and out of wash business, the vulnerabilities, and what the country is doing to make sure that we are curbing this challenge. Because in one way or another, when illicit finances is channeled into legal and proper financial streams, it brings distortions that are not right. Well, thank you very much for watching Trading Bell. I'm Nokip Kimboy. I'll leave you with the markets.